Deep in the Colorado mountains sits the most secure prison in America, a place where the worst of the worst are locked away 23 hours a day for the rest of their lives. A place where terrorists, spies, mob bosses, and serial killers exist in near total isolation. This is ADX Florence, the Supermax, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. And inside its concrete walls are some of the most dangerous criminals in American history. Welcome to the first part, America's Supermax. Administrative Maximum Facility, commonly known as ADX Florence, opened in November 1994 in Florence, Colorado. It was built for one purpose: to house federal prisoners deemed too dangerous, too violent, or too high risk for any other facility in the American prison system. The location was chosen carefully. Florence sits in Fremont County, about 90 miles south of Denver. The terrain is rugged, isolated, surrounded by mountains. Escape would be virtually impossible even if someone managed to breach the facility's multiple layers of security. The prison itself is a marvel of security architecture. It cost approximately $60 million to build and incorporates every lesson learned from decades of prison security failures. The designers studied every escape attempt, every riot, every security breach in American prison history, and then built a facility to prevent all of them. ADX Florence houses approximately 400 inmates at maximum capacity, though the population fluctuates. These are not typical federal prisoners. These are individuals who have proven themselves capable of extreme violence, who have escaped from other prisons, who have ordered murders from behind bars, or who pose such severe national security risks that standard maximum security facilities cannot contain them. The physical structure is imposing. The facility is made of reinforced concrete and steel. The exterior walls are designed to prevent both escape and outside attack. Guard towers equipped with high-powered rifles overlook the perimeter. Motion sensors, cameras, and pressure pads detect any unauthorized movement. Even the airspace above the prison is restricted. Inside, the design is deliberately oppressive. The facility is divided into different security levels, with the highest being reserved for the most dangerous inmates. Cells measure approximately 7 feet by 12 feet. Each contains a concrete bed, a concrete desk, a concrete stool, a stainless steel sink and toilet combination, and a small shower. There are no bars in ADX Florence. Instead, inmates are secured behind solid steel doors with narrow slots for food delivery. The doors are remotely controlled. No guard ever has to physically interact with an inmate unless absolutely necessary. The windows in each cell, and not every cell has one, are designed to prevent inmates from knowing their exact location within the facility. They're angled so prisoners can see only sky, never the ground or surrounding landscape. Natural light enters, but orientation is impossible. Communication between inmates is nearly impossible. The walls are soundproofed. Cells are positioned so inmates cannot see each other. Recreation time, limited to 1 hour per day, is conducted in individual concrete pens. Inmates exercise alone, in a small space that offers no view beyond concrete walls and a slice of sky. This is not incarceration. This is isolation on a level that most people cannot imagine. Life in ADX Florence follows a rigid, unchanging routine designed to maintain absolute control while preventing human contact that could lead to violence or conspiracy. Inmates wake at approximately 6 a.m. Breakfast is delivered through the slot in their cell door. They eat alone, in their cell. Every meal is consumed in solitude. The food at ADX is nutritionally adequate, but deliberately bland. This serves two purposes. First, it eliminates any items that could be used as weapons or tools, and second, it removes one of the few remaining pleasures available to inmates. After breakfast, inmates may have limited time for personal hygiene. Showers are taken inside the cell, on a schedule determined by the facility. Typically, inmates are allowed to shower approximately 3 times per week, though this varies by security level. Education and work programs, common in other federal prisons, are extremely limited at ADX. Some inmates are allowed to take correspondence courses, but access to materials is restricted. No group classes exist. No prison jobs are available for the highest security inmates. Recreation time, that single hour outside the cell, occurs in a concrete pen measuring approximately 10 feet by 20 feet. The pen has concrete walls approximately 20 feet high. There's no equipment, no weights, no balls, Nothing. Inmates can walk in circles, do calisthenics, or simply stand there. Then they return to their cells. The rest of the day, approximately 23 hours, is spent in their cell, alone, with nothing but their thoughts, whatever limited reading material they've been allowed, and the knowledge that tomorrow will be exactly the same. Television privileges, when granted, are limited to a small black and white television that receives only religious and educational programming. No news, no entertainment, no connection to the outside world beyond what prison officials approve. Visits from family members are rare and conducted under extreme security measures. Inmates and visitors are separated by thick glass. They communicate via telephone, under recorded lines that are monitored and can be cut off at any moment. Physical contact is prohibited. Many inmates go years without any visit at all. Legal visits with attorneys are slightly less restrictive, but still heavily monitored except for privileged attorney-client communications. Mail is heavily censored. Every letter, incoming or outgoing, is read and copied by prison officials. Anything deemed inappropriate is rejected. This includes references to other inmates, discussions of prison conditions, or anything officials consider threatening. The psychological impact of this environment is severe and well documented. Humans are social creatures. Extended isolation causes documented mental health deterioration, anxiety, depression, hallucinations, paranoia, and cognitive decline. Some inmates have been in these conditions for decades. Mental health care at ADX exists, but it's limited. Therapy sessions occur through the cell door slot. Medications are dispensed under supervision. For inmates who become acutely mentally ill, transfer to a psychiatric facility may occur, but this is rare. This is the daily reality for the inmates of ADX Florence. No matter who they were on the outside, no matter what crimes they committed, they all face the same crushing isolation, the same unchanging routine, the same endless days that blur into years that blur into decades. Now let's meet some of the men who call this place home. ADX Florence became internationally known after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. As the United States captured and convicted terrorists involved in various attacks against American interests, many were sent to the Supermax. Zacarias Moussaoui arrived at ADX in 2006. He is the only person to be convicted in the United States in connection with the September 11th attacks. Moussaoui was arrested in August 2001 before the attacks occurred, when his suspicious behavior at a flight school prompted an investigation. During his trial, Moussaoui's behavior was erratic. He fired his court-appointed attorneys. He made bizarre statements. He initially pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges, then tried to recant. He claimed alternating responsibility for and distance from the 9/11 plot. Mental health experts debated his competency. Ultimately, he pleaded guilty to 6 conspiracy charges related to the September 11th attacks. In 2006, a jury rejected the death penalty and sentenced him to life without parole. He was immediately transferred to ADX Florence. Moussaoui spends his days in isolation, cut off from other inmates, with no access to news about the world he tried to destroy. He will remain there until he dies. Ramzi Youssef is another high-profile terrorist at ADX. He was the mastermind behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, an attack that killed 6 people and injured over 1,000. The bomb, placed in a truck in the underground parking garage, was intended to topple one tower into the other. It failed, but the devastation was immense. After the bombing, Youssef fled the United States. He continued planning terrorist attacks internationally. In 1995, he was captured in Pakistan and extradited to the United States. He was convicted and sentenced to life, without parole plus 240 years. He has been at ADX since 1998. Youssef is kept in complete isolation. He has no contact with other inmates. His communications are monitored constantly. The government fears that even from prison, he could inspire or coordinate terrorist activities. Ted Kaczynski, known as the Unabomber, resided at ADX Florence until his death in 2023. Between 1978 and 1995, Kaczynski conducted a bombing campaign that killed 3 people and injured 23 others. He targeted universities, airlines, and individuals he believed represented technological society, which he opposed. Kaczynski was a mathematical prodigy, a Harvard graduate, a former professor. His manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, outlined his anti-technology philosophy. His crimes terrorized the nation for nearly 2 decades. In 1996, his brother recognized the writing style in the published manifesto and turned him in. Kaczynski was arrested at his remote cabin in Montana. To avoid the death penalty, he pleaded guilty and received life without parole. He spent over 2 decades at ADX before his death. Kaczynski's time at ADX was marked by his continued intellectual pursuits. He maintained extensive correspondence with academics and journalists. He continued writing, but he was isolated, separated from the wilderness he claimed to love, trapped in a concrete cell for the rest of his life. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the surviving Boston Marathon bomber, was transferred to ADX Florence after his conviction. In April 2013, he and his brother Tamerlan detonated 2 pressure cooker bombs near the finish line of the Boston Marathon, killing 3 people and injuring hundreds. Dzhokhar was 19 years old at the time of the attack. His trial revealed a complex picture: a teenager influenced by his older brother, radicalized through online extremist propaganda, but ultimately responsible for his choices and actions. In 2015, he was sentenced to death. While awaiting execution, he remains at ADX Florence under special administrative measures that severely limit his communications and contacts. He is isolated from other inmates and monitored constantly. These terrorists represent a fraction of the extremists housed at ADX. Others include individuals convicted of plotting to attack U.S. military installations, providing material support to terrorist organizations, and attempting to use weapons of mass destruction. ADX Florence also houses individuals who betrayed their country in the most profound ways. Robert Hansen was an FBI agent who spied for Soviet and Russian intelligence for over 20 years. His betrayal is considered one of the worst intelligence disasters in American history. Hansen sold thousands of classified documents, compromised numerous operations, and exposed American intelligence officers, some of whom were executed. What made Hansen's betrayal particularly shocking was that he was a counterintelligence specialist, specifically tasked with catching spies. He knew exactly what information would cause maximum damage, and he sold it for over $1.4 million in cash and diamonds. In 2001, Hansen was arrested after a tip from Russian intelligence. He pleaded guilty to 15 counts of espionage and conspiracy. To avoid the death penalty, he agreed to cooperate with investigators and accepted a sentence of life without parole. Hansen was sent to ADX Florence, where he remained until his death in 2023. He spent over 2 decades in isolation, reflecting on how his greed and ego destroyed his life and endangered countless others. Aldrich Ames, another notorious spy, served time at ADX Florence before being transferred to a different facility. Ames was a CIA officer who spied for the Soviet Union and Russia from 1985 to 1994. He compromised over 100 intelligence operations and was directly responsible for the deaths of at least 10 CIA assets. Ames spied for money, pure and simple. He had financial problems, expensive tastes, and no moral compass. He sold secrets that got people killed, and he did it without apparent remorse. After his arrest in 1994, Ames pleaded guilty and received life without parole. He spent years at ADX before being moved to a medium-security facility, a decision that sparked controversy given the severity of his crimes. The presence of these spies at ADX serves multiple purposes. First, it ensures they cannot access classified information or communicate with foreign intelligence services. Second, it sends a message to others who might consider betraying their country. You will spend the rest of your life in a concrete box, cut off from everyone and everything. The Supermax also houses mob bosses and organized crime leaders who proved too dangerous to keep in standard prisons. Salvatore "Sammy the Bull" Gravano briefly spent time at ADX after violating his witness protection agreement. Gravano was the underboss of the Gambino crime family and confessed to involvement in 19 murders. He became a government witness against mob boss John Gotti, providing testimony that led to Gotti's conviction. In exchange for his cooperation, Gravano received a reduced sentence and entered witness protection. But he couldn't stay out of crime. He became involved in a major ecstasy drug ring in Arizona. After his arrest and conviction, he was sent to ADX Florence for a period before being transferred to a less restrictive facility. Michael Swango is not a traditional organized crime figure, but his crimes were organized and systematic. Swango was a physician and serial killer who poisoned patients and colleagues. He is suspected of killing as many as 60 people during his medical career, though he was only convicted of 3 murders. Swango's case is particularly disturbing because of his profession. He took an oath to do no harm, then systematically murdered vulnerable patients under his care. After years of suspicion and close calls, he was finally arrested and pleaded guilty to murder charges. He received life without parole and was sent to ADX Florence. These inmates represent the criminal elite, individuals who wielded power on the outside and showed no hesitation in ordering or committing violence. At ADX, their power is neutralized. They cannot communicate with their organizations. They cannot order hits. They cannot intimidate witnesses. They are just prisoners, isolated and powerless. Perhaps the most dangerous category of ADX inmates are leaders of prison gangs, individuals who orchestrated violence inside other federal prisons and had to be removed for the safety of staff and other inmates. These gang leaders ran criminal enterprises from behind bars. They ordered murders, coordinated drug trafficking, and maintained iron control over their organizations despite being incarcerated. Standard maximum security facilities couldn't contain their influence. At ADX, their ability to communicate is severely restricted. They cannot pass messages to followers. They cannot coordinate activities. Their power, based on communication and intimidation, is effectively eliminated. The specifics of these cases are often less publicized than the terrorists or spies, but their presence at ADX is crucial to maintaining order in the broader federal prison system. By removing these leaders from general population facilities, officials can disrupt gang operations and reduce violence in other institutions. ADX Florence stands as America's answer to a difficult question. What do you do with prisoners who are too dangerous for any standard facility? The answer, controversial and criticized by human rights organizations, is total isolation, complete control, an existence so restrictive that it borders on psychological torture, according to some experts. Inside these walls are terrorists who tried to destroy America, spies who betrayed their country for money, mob bosses who ordered murders, serial killers who preyed on the vulnerable, and gang leaders who orchestrated violence from behind bars. These are not sympathetic figures. These are individuals who have proven themselves capable of extreme violence and manipulation. Many have shown no remorse for their actions. Some would continue their criminal activities if given any opportunity. But they are also human beings, subjected to conditions that raise serious ethical questions about the nature of punishment and the limits of state power. In the next part, we will explore more of ADX Florence's infamous residence, examine the controversies surrounding supermax incarceration, and ask difficult questions about whether this level of isolation serves justice or crosses the line into cruel and unusual punishment. For now, understand this. ADX Florence exists because some individuals cannot be safely housed anywhere else. Whether this justifies the conditions they endure is a question that continues to provoke debate. The fortress in the mountains holds America's worst, and they will remain there, in isolation and silence, for the rest of their lives. In this second part, we meet more of the Supermax's notorious inmates, examine the controversies surrounding their confinement, and confront difficult questions about justice, punishment, and human rights. This is where the story gets complicated. This is where we must ask, does locking someone in isolation for decades serve justice? Or does it cross a line we shouldn't cross? ADX Florence houses many inmates whose names are as widely known as Ted Kaczynski or the Boston Marathon bomber, but whose crimes are equally disturbing and whose danger remains just as real. Larry Hoover is the founder and longtime leader of the Gangster Disciples, one of the most powerful street gangs in American history. Under Hoover's leadership, the Gangster Disciples grew from a Chicago street gang into a nationwide criminal organization involved in drug trafficking, murder, extortion, and money laundering. What makes Hoover particularly dangerous is his ability to run his organization from behind bars. Even after his arrest and conviction in 1973 for ordering a murder, Hoover continued to direct gang operations from prison. He communicated through visitors, corrupt guards, and coded messages. He ordered hits, approved drug deals, and maintained absolute control over thousands of gang members. In 1995, federal authorities indicted Hoover on charges of running a continuing criminal enterprise. The evidence showed that he had continued directing the gangster disciples for over 2 decades from inside Illinois state prisons. He was convicted in 1997 and sentenced to 6 life sentences. Hoover was transferred to ADX Florence specifically because no other facility could prevent him from communicating with his organization. At the Supermax, his ability to lead is effectively eliminated. He cannot pass messages. He cannot meet with multiple visitors. His mail is heavily censored. His phone calls, when permitted, are monitored and recorded. Despite this isolation, Hoover has become a somewhat sympathetic figure to some activists and celebrities who argue he has reformed and should be released. They point to his age, now in his 70s, and claim he poses no current threat. Federal prosecutors vehemently disagree, arguing that Hoover would immediately resume leadership of the gangster disciples if released or transferred to a less restrictive facility. Eric Rudolph, known as the Olympic Park bomber, is serving multiple life sentences at ADX Florence. Between 1996 and 1998, Rudolph carried out a series of bombings targeting the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, 2 abortion clinics, and a lesbian nightclub. His attacks killed 2 people directly and caused a fatal heart attack in another victim. Over 100 people were injured. Rudolph's motivations were ideological. He opposed abortion and what he saw as the promotion of homosexuality and global socialism. His bombing campaign was designed to terrorize and intimidate. After the Olympic Park bombing, Rudolph evaded capture for 5 years. He lived in the mountains of North Carolina, surviving on stolen supplies and help from sympathizers. His capture in 2003 ended one of the longest manhunts in FBI history. Rudolph pleaded guilty to all charges to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences plus 120 years. He was sent to ADX Florence, where he remains today. In prison, he has continued to justify his actions through written statements, showing no remorse for the lives he destroyed. Terry Nichols was convicted as the co-conspirator of Timothy McVeigh in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, the deadliest domestic terrorist attack in American history. The bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building killed 168 people, including 19 children, and injured over 680 others. While McVeigh was executed in 2001, Nichols avoided the death penalty. He was convicted in federal court and received life without parole. He was subsequently convicted in Oklahoma State Court on 161 counts of first-degree murder and received 161 consecutive life sentences. Nichols has been at ADX Florence since his convictions. Unlike McVeigh, who remained defiant until his execution, Nichols has expressed remorse for the bombing. However, his statements have been inconsistent, and many victims' families believe his remorse is not genuine. At ADX, Nichols exists in the same isolation as the other inmates. The man who helped plan an attack that killed 168 people, including children in a daycare center, spends 23 hours a day in a 7 by 12-foot cell. He will remain there until he dies. Mahmoud Abu Halima, one of the conspirators in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing alongside Ramzi Youssef, also resides at ADX Florence. Abu Halima was convicted of mixing the chemicals for the massive bomb that killed 6 people and injured over 1,000. After the bombing, Abu Halima fled to Egypt but was captured and returned to the United States. He was convicted in 1994 and sentenced to life without parole. He has been at ADX since 1999. Like the other terrorists at the Supermax, Abu Halima is kept in complete isolation. The government considers him an ongoing security risk, capable of radicalizing other inmates or coordinating terrorist activities if given any opportunity to communicate. Some inmates are at ADX Florence not because of the severity of their original crimes, but because they have proven themselves capable of escaping from other prisons. Richard Lee McNair earned his place at ADX through sheer audacity and skill. McNair was serving 2 life sentences for murder when he escaped from prison not once, not twice, but 3 times. His first escape, in 1987, was relatively simple. He walked away from a minimum security facility in North Dakota. He was recaptured within months. His second escape, in 1992, was more impressive. He and 2 other inmates constructed a makeshift ladder and scaled the wall of a North Dakota maximum security facility. McNair was recaptured after 10 months on the run, but his third escape, in 2006, became legendary in law enforcement circles. McNair was being held at the United States Penitentiary in Pollock, Louisiana. He managed to escape by hiding in a shipment of mail bags leaving the prison. He squeezed into a breathing hole in one of the bags and was literally mailed out of the facility. Once free, McNair stole a car and drove to Canada. He was stopped by police in Canada just hours after his escape, but he talked his way out of the traffic stop through calm conversation and a believable fake identity. Video of this encounter shows McNair's remarkable composure under pressure. McNair remained free for over a year, one of the longest successful escapes in modern American history. He was finally captured in October 2007 in Canada and extradited back to the United States. Because of his escape history and his demonstrated ability to manipulate security systems and personnel, McNair was transferred to ADX Florence. The facility is considered escape-proof. McNair will spend the rest of his life there, his legendary escapes reduced to stories told in a concrete cell. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, one of the world's most powerful drug lords, was sent to ADX Florence specifically because of his escape history. As the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, Guzman oversaw a drug trafficking empire that smuggled billions of dollars worth of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana into the United States. What made El Chapo particularly notorious were his escapes from Mexican maximum security prisons. In 2001, he escaped from a Mexican prison, allegedly by hiding in a laundry cart. He remained free for 13 years, continuing to run his cartel and becoming one of the world's most wanted fugitives. After his recapture in 2014, he was placed in Mexico's highest security prison. In 2015, he escaped again, this time through a sophisticated tunnel that extended over a mile from his cell to a house outside the prison. The tunnel had lighting, ventilation, and even a modified motorcycle on rails for transportation. It was an engineering marvel that demonstrated the resources and determination of El Chapo and his organization. He was recaptured in 2016 and extradited to the United States in 2017. In 2019, he was convicted on numerous charges including drug trafficking, money laundering, and murder conspiracy. He was sentenced to life plus 30 years and ordered to forfeit over $12 billion. The judge specifically recommended that El Chapo be sent to ADX Florence, stating that it was the only facility secure enough to hold him. Since his arrival at the Supermax, El Chapo has been held under the strictest conditions. He has virtually no contact with other inmates. His communications are severely restricted. His visitors are limited and heavily monitored. At ADX, El Chapo's vast wealth and power mean nothing. He cannot bribe guards. He cannot tunnel out. He cannot coordinate with his cartel. He is simply another inmate in a concrete box, and he will remain there until he dies. The conditions at ADX Florence, while designed for security, have profound psychological effects on inmates. Medical and mental health professionals have studied Supermax incarceration extensively, and their findings are disturbing. Prolonged isolation causes measurable cognitive decline. Inmates experience difficulty concentrating, memory problems, confusion, and perceptual distortions. Some begin to hallucinate, hearing voices or seeing things that aren't there. Depression is nearly universal among long-term ADX inmates. The monotony, the lack of human contact, the absence of meaningful activity all contribute to a crushing sense of hopelessness. Suicide rates in Supermax facilities are significantly higher than in general prison populations. Anxiety disorders develop or worsen in isolation. Some inmates experience panic attacks triggered by the confined space or the overwhelming silence. Others develop paranoia, convinced that guards or other inmates are plotting against them. The Bureau of Prisons maintains that adequate mental health care is provided at ADX Florence. Psychologists and psychiatrists are available. Medications are dispensed. Crisis intervention occurs when needed. But critics argue that mental health care through a cell door slot is inadequate. They point out that therapy requires trust and rapport, which are nearly impossible to develop in such restrictive conditions. They note that some inmates deteriorate mentally despite treatment, suggesting the environment itself is the problem. Several lawsuits have challenged ADX conditions as cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment. Some have resulted in settlements or policy changes. Others have been dismissed by courts that found the conditions, while harsh, are justified by security needs. One particularly significant case involved mentally ill inmates who were held at ADX despite their conditions. In 2012, a settlement agreement required the Bureau of Prisons to exclude inmates with serious mental illness from ADX Florence. The agreement acknowledged that supermax conditions could worsen mental illness to dangerous levels. However, determining who qualifies as seriously mentally ill is complicated. Some inmates develop mental health problems after arriving at ADX. Others hide their symptoms, fearing that acknowledging mental illness will be seen as weakness. And some inmates, including several mentioned in this documentary, committed their crimes at least partially due to mental illness, but are considered stable enough for ADX. The existence of ADX Florence raises profound ethical questions that extend beyond individual cases to fundamental issues about punishment, justice, and human rights. Is prolonged isolation torture? The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture has stated that solitary confinement exceeding 15 days can constitute torture. Many ADX inmates have been in isolation for years or decades. By this standard, the United States is engaging in systematic torture of its own citizens. Supporters of ADX counter that these are not ordinary prisoners. These are terrorists, spies, serial killers, and gang leaders who have proven themselves extraordinarily dangerous. Standard prisons cannot safely house them. The alternative to ADX is either execution or allowing these individuals to continue threatening public safety from behind bars. Does ADX serve any rehabilitative purpose? The traditional goals of incarceration include punishment, deterrence, incapacitation, and rehabilitation. ADX clearly achieves the first three. But rehabilitation is impossible in such extreme isolation. Inmates have no opportunity to demonstrate behavioral change, develop prosocial skills, or prepare for release, even in the rare cases where release might be possible. Critics argue this violates the basic principle that prisons should prepare inmates to eventually rejoin society. Supporters respond that most ADX inmates will never rejoin society. They are serving life without parole or effectively equivalent sentences. Rehabilitation is irrelevant when release will never occur. Is there a less restrictive alternative? Some experts argue that modern technology and security measures could allow dangerous inmates to be housed in slightly less restrictive conditions. Video monitoring, electronic security, and careful programming could provide some human contact and mental stimulation while maintaining safety. The Bureau of Prisons maintains that such alternatives have been considered and rejected as too risky. The consequences of an escape, a successful attack, or coordinated criminal activity from prison are too severe to risk. What about inmates who are eventually released? While most ADX inmates will die in prison, some are eventually transferred to less restrictive facilities, and a very small number may eventually be released on parole or after completing their sentences. What happens to someone who has spent years in extreme isolation and then must function in a less restrictive environment? Research shows that transition from supermax is extraordinarily difficult. Inmates struggle with social interaction, sensory overload, decision-making, and basic life skills. Some become so institutionalized to isolation that they prefer to remain in restrictive conditions rather than face the challenges of a more open environment. To fully understand ADX Florence, we must consider the perspective of those who support its existence and believe the harsh conditions are justified. Corrections officials emphasize that ADX is not used arbitrarily. Inmates are not sent there as punishment for minor infractions. They are transferred to ADX only after demonstrating extreme danger through violent behavior, escape attempts, or ongoing criminal leadership. The Bureau of Prisons points out that ADX has a step-down program. Inmates who demonstrate good behavior over extended periods can earn gradual increases in privileges and eventual transfer to less restrictive facilities. This incentivizes compliance and provides a pathway away from the harshest conditions. Victims' families often support ADX and argue against any relaxation of conditions. For them, knowing that the person who murdered their loved one, or bombed their community, or destroyed their family lives in harsh conditions provides some measure of justice. They reject arguments about cruel and unusual punishment, pointing out that their loved ones receive the ultimate cruel punishment, death. Law enforcement officials credit ADX with significantly disrupting criminal organizations. Gang leaders who once ran operations from standard prisons cannot do so from ADX. Terrorists who might radicalize other inmates are isolated. The security of the broader prison system and public safety are enhanced by the existence of this facility. National security experts view ADX as essential for housing terrorism convicts. These individuals pose unique risks. They may have knowledge of ongoing plots, contacts with terrorist organizations, or the ability to inspire violence through their words alone. Standard prison conditions could allow them to continue their war against America from behind bars. As we conclude our exploration of ADX Florence, we must ask, what is the future of supermax incarceration in America? Some European countries have moved away from long-term solitary confinement, finding that security can be maintained through other means. Scandinavian prisons, known for their rehabilitative focus, house even dangerous offenders in conditions that would be unthinkable in the United States. Their recidivism rates are lower than American rates, suggesting alternative approaches may be effective. However, critics of the European model argue that cultural differences make direct comparison impossible. American society is more violent, and American criminals are more dangerous, they claim. What works in Norway might not work in the United States. Prison reform advocates continue to push for changes at ADX Florence. They propose increased human contact, better mental health care, more programming, and clearer pathways to step-down facilities. They argue these changes could maintain security while reducing the psychological harm of extreme isolation. The Bureau of Prisons has made some modifications over the years. Mental health screening has improved. The step-down program has been formalized. Some extremely restrictive practices have been relaxed. But the fundamental nature of ADX, extreme isolation and control, remains unchanged. Legal challenges continue. Courts must balance constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment with legitimate security needs and public safety concerns. Each case adds to the evolving legal framework around supermax incarceration. ADX Florence stands as a stark monument to the complicated relationship America has with crime and punishment. It houses individuals who have committed acts of extraordinary violence and betrayal. It serves legitimate security purposes that even its critics sometimes acknowledge. But it also raises profound questions about human dignity, the limits of state power, and what we become as a society when we subject people to conditions that many experts consider torture. The inmates we've discussed in this documentary are not sympathetic figures. They are terrorists who killed innocent people, spies who betrayed their country, drug lords who destroyed communities, serial killers who preyed on the vulnerable, gang leaders who ordered murders. They made choices that resulted in death, suffering, and destruction. But they are also human beings, subjected to conditions of isolation and control that are unprecedented in their severity and duration. Conditions that cause measurable psychological harm. Conditions that serve security purposes but also satisfy society's desire for vengeance. Perhaps the most uncomfortable truth about ADX Florence is that it reflects who we are as a society. It shows how we respond to those who violate our most fundamental rules. It demonstrates the lengths we will go to ensure security and punish wrongdoing. And it reveals our willingness to inflict suffering on those we deem deserving, even when that suffering serves no rehabilitative purpose. The fortress in the Colorado mountains will continue to house America's most dangerous prisoners. New inmates will arrive as courts sentence terrorists, traitors, and violent criminals. Others will die there, having spent decades in isolation, their final years unmarked by anything but the same unchanging routine. The debates about ADX Florence will continue. Human rights advocates will challenge its conditions. Victims' families will defend its necessity. Security experts will argue for its importance. And the inmates will remain isolated and silent, living testaments to the price of their crimes and the nature of American justice. There are no easy answers here, no simple solutions, only difficult questions about security and humanity, punishment and dignity, justice and cruelty. ADX Florence exists because we decided it needed to exist. We built it, we fill it, we maintain it. And whatever we think about its conditions, we must acknowledge that it is ours. A creation of American society, reflecting American values and American choices about how to handle those who threaten us most. The secrets of ADX Florence are not hidden. They are documented, litigated, and debated. What remains secret is what we truly believe about punishment, about human dignity, and about how far we are willing to go in the name of security and justice.